I am Carol Gray, and I'm going to introduce myself and my esteemed colleagues, Michelle Emanuel and Alison Hazelbaker. This is the moment where I forget your names. It happens to me all the time. Like when the pressure's on, I can't remember somebody's name, even though I know you really well. We are going to talk about torticollis and plagiocephaly. I am going to discuss the causes of torticollis and, to a certain extent, plagiocephaly. Michelle Emanuel is going to teach us about treatment strategies, and Alison Hazelbaker is going to talk about breastfeeding impacts. And we are sincerely hoping that you will hold all of your questions until all three of us have finished talking, even though there will be a great temptation to interrupt us and ask us questions. But what's going to happen is I'm going to talk for a half an hour, Michelle's going to talk for a half an hour. I know I did that thing, I touched my microphone. And Alison is going to talk for a half an hour, and then we're going to be a panel and try not to argue too much with each other, just a little bit. And you can ask questions, and all three of us will probably talk at the same time because we're going to be sharing a microphone. It's going to work out great. So, and by the way, we totally love each other, yes. Even though we may disagree. So, this is the title, Torticollis and Plagiocephaly. And so I'm going to try to tell my story with images, okay? I'm not going to have a bunch of words up on my PowerPoint thing. Mostly I'm going to have pictures. And so here's what I found. When I started looking around for wonderful images of torticollis, I went to iStock Photos, right, hoping to get a nice $3 picture that I could show of torticollis. So they have a little search engine. And in that search engine, I typed torticollis, okay? And this is what I got. Lots. Page after page after page of tortilla images, okay? So, go figure. There are other sources of images, of free images even, on the internet, and I did finally find some. And so torticollis used to be called wry neck syndrome, okay? And typically what we see with someone who has torticollis, and what the kind of the mainstream medical view of this condition is that we've got either lateral flexion or a rotation, okay? So this baby's got the double whammy, right? She's got a left lateral flexion, her left, okay, and a right rotation. She's got both things going on. And the medical view kind of is like, this is a neck thing. It's maybe it's a fibrous tumor in sternocleidomastoid, or her trapezius muscle. It's about the muscles, and they're tight and whatever. I'm here to tell you that it's a whole body thing. This is not just about necks. And you can even see, even though she's got kind of a sort of a flouncy dress on, we can see that she's got a pretty good kind of, looks like a C curve on the left side of her torso as well. So here's another baby. This is the gallery of twisted babies, okay? So this one, check this baby out. Okay, this baby has a right lateral flexion and a left rotation and a right C curve, right, totally throughout her trunk. She's got a rotated pelvis. The right side of her pelvis is rotated anteriorly. She's pretty twisted up. Next baby. I'm sorry this is a little pixelated, but this image was so compelling. And these are like people's Facebook photos, their babies, they just put them out there. And so I hope that this isn't your grandchild or something, But this is one twisted baby, okay? He's pretty happy, but look at him. He's got like a massive C curve on the right side of his torso. His pelvis is really, really, really high on the right. It's almost like a whole pelvis worth of high. And he's rotated, viewed from the top. If you just, viewed from the top of his head and looked down, his pelvis would be rotated counterclockwise, like what, maybe 20 degrees. This baby's not in very good shape. And he's pretty old, How old do you think this baby is? Maybe 4 or 5 months old, maybe, something like that. And he's got, he's going to have a lot of compensating to do in his life. We want to, he's going to do all kinds of crazy things to keep his eyes level with the horizon once he can sit and stand and walk on his own if he doesn't get this stuff worked out. Okay, so what causes this incredible problem? So, you know, kind of like you know, very, 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 very rarely, you know, a baby gets injured in the birth process, and it's a neurological thing, okay, you know, or it's something like that. But, and sometimes they will have like some, what they call a fibrous tumor, some just big mass of collagen fibers and sternocleidomastoid that'll cause them to rotate or something. But like hardly ever it's that, okay? There are a lot of causes. Cause number one, believe it or not, we learned from Michelle, maternal stress, okay? If this mom is freaked out all the time, pumping out cortisol day after day after day, she's gonna, her baby in utero is exposed to that and is at risk for vagus nerve compromise, which, and vagus nerves, you know, they innervate SCM and triceps, not triceps, excuse me. What's the name of that? So, okay, traps, trapezius. I knew that. Okay, I studied anatomy. Okay, so that's one cause. I know, don't you love this? I know. It's like, don't tell my kids. They'll send me to home. All right, so next one. Go. All right, so here we got, this is normal, okay? This is a really nicely, ideally positioned baby, you know, kind of ready for birth, you know. Baby's not dropped down deep into the pelvis. You can see the pubes here, and you can see almost all of the baby's head here. This little dot is apparently some little marker that tells us the best place to hear this baby's heartbeat, which indeed that is the best place for this baby. So this baby's got the left side of the back on the, you know, on the left, but the baby's back is on the left side of the mother's body, facing the front. Totally, totally awesome, okay? And so when babies drop down deep into the pelvis, they don't always drop in there in an ideal position for birth or to simply grow. The fastest, so we grow, our growth rate is the fastest like in the 2-3 days after conception, okay? From that point on, it slows down. There's a little uptick in puberty, but that's about it. And so, now granted, a baby who is just born is still growing incredibly fast. But I want you to remember that the most rapid growth is right after conception. Okay? And it's really rapid. What, we double in size like, you know, 2-3 times in the first 2 or 3 days. That's incredible. After that, it gets slower. So the other thing I want you to know is that babies grow into available space, okay? And this baby's doing a reasonable job of that. Now, sometimes babies have less available space in the case of twins and multiples, okay? So these babies have a little less room to grow in, and although they can slip around and slide around each other, we often see issues like torticollis with twins and higher order multiples simply because they're sharing the uterus with another little baby, a sibling, and that's also taking up space. Okay, triplets. Okay, these are the twisted three. Look at them. They're cute, okay? Apparently they just turned 1. They got their little 1-year-old t-shirts on. And you know, uh-oh, wrong thing, sorry. So we've got, you know, this little guy, you know, he's got this ear down here and that one up here, kind of swung around. She's swung around the other way. And they look pretty twisty to me. Throughout the body. Remember, torticollis is not just a neck thing, really. It's a whole body thing, really and truly. So these are the little twisty triplets. Okay, what's another cause of torticollis? Oligohydramnios, low amniotic fluid. Now I know that it's also sort of a code word for it's time to do your cesarean because we want to play golf this weekend or something. But now and then, really and truly, some babies do have less amniotic fluid than they ought to have. And when there's less fluid relative to the amount of baby in the uterus, the baby has less buoyancy, less ability, again, to move around and move their necks. You know, like, did you ever make that face, any kind of face, and your mother said you do that too much, you'll get stuck that way? That's kind of what's happening with these babies with torticollis. They do this too much, they get stuck that way. And they grow into that. Remember, rapid growth and growing into available space. It's a wonderful thing, but if the baby is in restricted available space, it's a problem. So that's one of the problems. Boop, come back here. Short cord. This baby can't move around very much without pulling the placenta off the wall of the uterus, right? Because this baby's got a little teeny tiny short cord. So that's another cause. So I know you've seen this slide before. I didn't goof up. But I want to talk about mother's abdominal organs, okay? They really get squished when she's got a big baby in her belly. And if mother goes into pregnancy with restrictions in her abdominal organs, that makes less space for a baby. A baby who can't grow up has no choice but to either grow out or to grow down. Growing down's a problem if they get jammed down into the pelvis long before it's time to get born. Okay, that's a big problem. For any of you who've studied visceral manipulation and they all say like, whoa, don't touch the pregnant women, don't do any of this stuff with them. I'm here to tell you, do it, do it, do it. Do it often, do it early. Get these, you can still do a lot of work with women's abdominal organs during pregnancy to free up restrictions so that their babies have the opportunity to fill the beautiful available space that really ought to be there for them. Okay, next slide. This baby is sharing a uterus with a whole bunch of fibroid tumors, okay? The hormones of pregnancy can cause fibroids to grow pretty big sometimes, and sometimes there's a whole other baby or 2 or 3's worth of fibroids in there with them, and again, that affects the baby's ability to move around and move their heads around and move their torsos around so that they have balance, length, and strength in the fascial organization and the muscles and all of the structures in their little baby bodies. Okay, sometimes there's uterine weirdness, okay? So here you've got all kinds of examples of strange anatomical variations that could happen. You know, you got like, here's a woman, she's got 2 cervixes and two uterus, she's got a bicornate uterus, and sometimes there's a septum in the uterus and things like that. If a baby's trying to grow in a uterus like this, it's really tough for them to move around. Again, the baby could just get stuck on one side like this baby. This baby is developing in what we would call a heart-shaped uterus, and not only will it be challenging for this baby to get him or herself born, this baby is developing in a really weird position. Look at the way this baby's body is now. And as this baby grows larger, it's going to be even more difficult for the baby to move, and that strain pattern in the baby's body will be more and more well developed over time. Uterine scarring. This is a skin scar happening. Okay, this mom has still got her staples in from her cesarean birth, but she's also got a scar on her uterus and on the lower segment of her uterus. And in theory, that area will not move as well as the rest of her uterus when it comes time for her to have another baby grow in there and find space to move and ultimately find the space that it takes to assume an ideal position for birth. Okay, so we all know what this stuff is, okay? We've got what we call ligaments. We've got, you know, pleats of fascia. This is a uterus here. I'm sorry, there's a hook grabbing it and lifting it up, but they have, you know, it's like normally it's supposed to flop anteriorly, and so if you want to see what's in there, they lift them up. And we've got all these ligaments and all this fascial tissue that basically support the uterus in the bony pelvis. There are so many ways to get restrictions in these tissues, I can't even tell you. And they all can affect the ability of the baby to move in utero, again, to develop normally and find an ideal position for birth. So restrictions of the support structures of the uterus are also a cause of torticollis. Okay, bone is not hard and chalky. Bone is living. It's got flex to it. Sometimes we have bony lesions, those of us that do this work. We know that we can find those. We can, of course, relieve those with body work. But bony lesions where the bones themselves don't move the way they're supposed to can be a problem. We can also have problems with all of these ligaments that cross, you know, the SI joints and that cross the pubes. You can see all these ligaments. These things can restrict mobility in the mother's bony pelvis and can also create a situation, again, where a baby can't have the space to develop normally. sedentary lifestyle. This woman is about in just about the crappiest position I can think of for growing a baby, you know. I mean, she is, we know that the baby's head's pretty heavy. We know that front to back, the back side of the baby's body is heavier than the front side, okay? You know, like bony back here, squishy to here, and she's like setting herself up, right, for her baby to be in this position for birth, which is, you know, not so good. Not so good for development either. So, what's this? This is your 5-minute audience with your OB, okay? And that's what this dude's doing. He's not even palpating her belly. He doesn't care what position her baby's in because he's also a surgeon, okay? So what's he doing? He's sticking a Doppler on her belly, and it's not the kind where you got to listen and you got to time. It's the one that automatically calculates the heart rate of the baby after about 3 seconds, and he goes boom, 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 boom. Okay, I'll see you next time. Got any questions? I'm out of here. And that's it. And so caregivers who do not palpate the position of a baby are part of the problem. And women need to be insisting that they get palpated. And doctors need to keep learning how to palpate in medical school. That's another problem. We've become so reliant on medical imaging to give us information about our babies that, you know, it's a serious problem. So I can't tell you how many times I get a pregnant woman who shows up in my bodywork practice. She's 38 weeks pregnant, and she says to me, you know, I just had my 37-week ultrasound, and my baby is breech. Now, I'm guessing that that baby did not flip head up on the way to the ultrasound lab, okay? Like, that baby's probably been that way for a while. And she's been going at that stage of her pregnancy, she's been going to the doctor or her midwife every week for a while. Why, oh, why didn't somebody figure out that this baby was in a less than ideal position like weeks ago? So these guys and women are part of the problem. Okay. We don't embrace this stuff in our culture either. This is a belly lifting garment. It's a piece of cloth, and it's lifting her belly. We want to be able to make sure that babies' heads aren't dropped down and stuck deeply into the mother's pelvis for weeks in advance of birth, okay? And one great way to do it is to wear something like this. And if you don't like this, we got the Western version of it too, okay? Just so, like, if you need to have a sort of an orthopedic device or something, you know, we've got this kind too. All right. This is a huge problem in my opinion. We are obsessed with engagement. You can Google "my baby dropped" and get thousands of pages of accounts of babies dropping. Women come to me in pregnancy for body work, they don't come to me for midwifery care because I don't do that anymore, but they come to me for body work. My baby dropped. I'm so excited. And I'm thinking, like, seriously? So, like, now everything's going to be great because your baby is this much closer to being born? That's ridiculous. You know, or does it mean that you will give birth, that you won't be pregnant forever? Or what? I don't know why we've embraced this as like the most incredible thing. Now, everybody knows that first babies engage, right? We kind of, you know, or they drop, or I think it's also called lightening, you know. And so here, I've got the dictionary definition of engagement here. Fixation, oh, bad word, right? Fixation of the presenting part of the fetus in the maternal pelvis. That's a problem. We don't want them fixated. Fixated means that not only are they unable to come back up, they might not be able to go down. And that's the classic problem, the baby that can't descend and get born, right? So, fixation. Okay, most people think this normally happens between 36 and 38 weeks of pregnancy, right? Of gestation, rather. So we just expect that that's normal. It's not true. So I found this awesome research article in the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology, published in 1975, which is really cool, and that says that 80% of first babies drop down and stay down less than 14 days prior to delivery. Okay, in 1975, nobody was inducing for post dates. And so these babies who are engaging fewer than 14 days prior to delivery may be engaging at 40, 42 weeks. Get it? Yeah. But we got it happening earlier. I think there's something going on. I think, a lot of these factors that I've talked about are part of the problem. Okay. How do we prevent torticollis? All right. We support our mothers. As a culture, we support them to have calm, nurtured, happy pregnancies. That will make a difference for the babies who have the vagus nerve compromise, okay? And we don't do a very good job of that. And I frankly think we should be ashamed of ourselves. In this room, although we are part of the change, we are a big part of the change, and I'm really honored to be in a room full of people who are part of the change. Next. Body work, body work, body work, okay? This mama's getting her round ligaments released. It can make a huge difference, okay? Body work, body work, body work. I do a fair amount of body work with pregnant women standing. It works really well. This particular technique is now called the womb dance. I taught it simultaneously with inventing it. And it was somebody, I don't know who, Corinne, I don't know if you're in this room. I think you were in the class where I did that. I don't know if I admitted it at the time. So the uterus is an incredible handle on all of its support structures. And when it's big during pregnancy, we can grasp it easily. And so this therapist is behind the pregnant mama, and she's holding on to the uterus, but what she's really doing is unwinding all of those suspensory ligaments and the lower segment of the uterus at the same time. It's an awesome technique, and it can make a lot of space. We had a baby in a class that I taught turn from breech to vertex. You were in that class, Melka, where that baby turned during the treatment simply by getting some space in which to move. Because babies know what to do. They know how to be, they know how to fit, but if they can't move, if they're stuck, they can't do it, even in spite of their knowledge. This technique is called sit on my hands. Okay, and this it's okay though, because the woman is doing she's a midwife, so it's all right. And she basically has the pregnant mama's ischial tuberosities in her hands, and she can feel into the entire pelvic floor, and again use those bony handles as bony handles on all of the soft tissue, and it'll work right through both the deep and the superficial layers of the pelvic floor. It's an awesome technique, and we can also do a little thing like we can exaggerate our movements with the moms and say, well, you notice when I do this, it feels really like it moves really well. Come back the other way, it's kind of a no-go. And moms will say, oh yeah, I feel that. And it helps them, drop into their pelvic floor and really connect and again, be able to release things in a mutually beneficial, sort of in a mutual conversation with the therapist. This Leopold's maneuver. This is the recipe for how you figure out what's a butt and what's a head when you're feeling a baby. I want to just say again that doing hands-on evaluation of babies in utero and really getting clear about their positions, and not just like, is the head down? Because those women who get those 37-week ultrasounds, the head's down. Well, there's a lot more to it. Is the chin tucked? Which way is the back, and et cetera, et cetera. So we can get, with practice, really, really good at figuring out positions of babies. And as body workers who are treating pregnant women, we should be palpating fetuses, babies. We should be doing these fetal palpation maneuvers over and over and over again so that we get really, really, really good at it, so that we can help moms know what position their babies are in. We're going to do it under the guise of education, right? Like, here, do you know how to tell where your baby is? Put your hand here. This thing is a back. This feels like a head. And teach the moms, and we're teaching ourselves at the same time. And if there's an issue, then we can say, you got to come for more body work. We got to get this thing going. Active pregnancy. We need to, you know, we've got a lot of, it's amazing. In America, most families are operating on 2 incomes now, and it's really hard for women to take time for themselves, and they may be chained to desks during their pregnancies. So not only do they have inactive daily lives due to their work for the most part, they might not have time to take care of themselves and to move in their bodies. And we need to, I don't know how we do this, but we've got to start promoting this. Women need to be taking some more time for themselves, because it really does matter. These things. We need to embrace these things. These are awesome. We have a lot of high-tech industry in Portland, and I see families from India. There are a lot of software engineers from India, and when the women in those families get pregnant, they often will have a mother-in-law or somebody come from India, and they'll stay for months. And I always say, like, well, when your sister comes or your mother-in-law comes, you ask her to bring you one of those special saris that's made for, you know, lifting the belly, and it's good for binding the belly afterwards too, which is another important thing. Have her bring you one of those things, and you know, they'll ask me things like, is it okay for us to massage the baby every day? Yeah. They wonder if they're, you know, if they're doing the right stuff, because they're really kind of embracing whatever it is we're doing culturally, and so we need to be promoting this stuff, because this is the right stuff. I'm going to talk about positional plagiocephaly now. I'm just going to define it. So, what's the cause of, well, so positional plagiocephaly happens like this. It always starts with torticollis. You can't have positional plagiocephaly without a neck problem, in my opinion. My colleagues may disagree with me. But, so, you got the baby who's got this thing going on, right? This is all Lois can do. Okay, back to sleep program. Dun, dun, dun. The very nicest thing I can say about it is that it's controversial. Okay, now, Lois's mother is afraid she's going to die, and so she puts her, you know, on a slab of cedar every night, you know, like this, okay? And it doesn't take too long for this side of the back of Lois's head to get flat, okay? And eventually gravity's going to bring this down too, okay? So she's going to get a parallelogram-shaped head really soon. That is positional plagiocephaly. Okay, that's the quick. And furthermore, even if we get her neck stuff figured out and she can turn her head, what's going to happen is that when she falls asleep, she's going to default to the flat spot even as she's gaining strength. It's sort of like if you saw the end of a bowling ball and you roll it down the bowling alley, it's always going to land on the flat spot every single time. Eventually, when it stops, it's going to be on the flat spot. It's not going to be on the round spot. And the same thing is going to happen to these babies. Okay, I thought about showing a lot of examples, but this is just classic, okay? This baby's nose is here. Okay, sagittal suture down here somewhere. Okay, we got an ear back here, and okay, that's the thing that we're hoping to prevent. So what else do we know about this? So this is a little diagram. So this is the mirror image of this. The dotted line is the shape the baby's head ought to be. Okay, but forces again. Back sleeping plus torticollis has caused this flat spot, okay? So over here, same deal, okay? Flat spot here, dotted line here. See how these ears are swinging around? They're starting, okay? Down here and here are more severe examples of what happens over time if this stuff isn't addressed up here, okay? So again, dotted line is the normal shape of the baby's head. Solid line is like, whoa, this is going to bust. It's got to go somewhere. That brain is growing. So if this part's getting flat and this part's getting flat, over here and over here, it's going to get bigger, and the ear is going to swing around even more. This happens to be, these diagrams down here happen to be brachycephaly, which is when baby does not have what we call a head-turning preference to one side or the other. They're flat on their backs, and they just get flat, 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 and both ears come forward. This is the side view. Again, the dotted line is what the baby's head ought to look like. The solid line is like the whoa, and you can see how flat it is here. Okay. I had to explain that, even though it's not really part of this talk. You're probably wondering. Okay, what causes positional plagiocephaly? Wouldn't you like to know? I do the math. Okay, so here you got, okay, torticollis, okay? All right. Swaddling. Swaddling. I hate swaddling. except for very rare things, okay? And don't even get me started on hip dysplasia. But this baby is immobilized. Swaddling for sleep is the worst. Like I could see, you got a baby who's like totally freaked out, and you want to wind them up in the straitjacket for a few minutes so that they calm down, okay? That's all right. But like sleeping that way, so like they're doomed if they've got torticollis, okay? They've got, so swaddling, back to sleep, car seat, car seat, car seat. All the time car seat. Now we can make it into a stroller. You don't ever have to take the baby out of the car seat if you don't want to. This is a problem. Firm contact of the back, or in this case the side of the back of the baby's head, with a firm surface is what makes the flat spot. That and gravity, right? Playing on the back, uncool, okay, for the baby who's got torticollis, because you're just increasing their contact with firm surfaces. We want soft, available, mobile space for these babies to grow, right? Okay, bottle feeding, not so good. They don't get to trade sides. Everybody figures out their own special way of bottle feeding, and they do it the same way all the time. Not everybody, but many people. This, uh-oh, sorry, wrong thing. This baby happens to be on a flat surface, too. So, like, that's another problem. Okay, check this out. You know what's on the other side of this thing? An iPad. Yeah, so you can put the baby in the little Vibromatic seat, and you can turn on the Baby Smart DVD or whatever it is, or the app, you know, and we don't ever have to pick them up and hold them. All of these things contribute to positional plagiocephaly. This is part of the fix, breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is really super helpful for babies who have torticollis to have less ability to develop plagiocephaly. What else have we got? Co-sleeping. This baby's sleeping on her side. She's getting a variety of sleep positions, and I like that. Not everybody does, but I like it. I think it's good for this baby's development. Tummy play. Okay, we had the twins. They look pretty good, don't they? For, you know, babies who grew into somewhat restricted space, we know that. They're twins. Tummy play. Carrying. Soft carriers. That's really important. Babies need soft, available space in which to develop. And again, this is so much better than a car seat for all involved. And last but not least, hold our babies. Hold them, hold them, hold them. Forget about trying to figure out what we can put them in that vibrates or coos or whatever it does so that we don't have to hold them. Babies need to be held. That's all I got to say. All right. Now we have to do a mic change. And then Michelle is going to talk.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about treatment. Look at all those letters by my name. Ooh. It's not a big deal, really. I'm proud of this one, the National Board Certified Reflexologist. I really like that one. It was a hard test. Okay. So tortillas. It's not a problem of the sternocleidomastoid, and I know that's like a commonly held belief. And many of us have even heard that Carol mentioned a pseudo-tumor, which is not a tumor, really. But there sometimes is like a harder nodule that can be found in the sternocleidomastoid, but it's most definitely not a problem of the sternocleidomastoid. We'll get into that in a minute. And stretching can actually hinder the healing process. And it also depends on what you're measuring. Are you looking at range of motion? Is that what your primary goal is, or are you looking at function? So if you're looking just at range of motion, you might be compelled to feel like stretching helps or works. But if you're looking at function, a whole body perspective, a holistic perspective, you might be asking yourself functionally, what is going on? What's the problem? Plagiocephaly, the flat spot is not the problem. So what is the problem? Well, there are lots of different things that the problem could be, but the flat spot is just a symptom of a problem. And basically, the reason is because there's a whole lot of bones that fuse into a few bones. They're very soft and pliable, and they have very few bone ossification centers. I'm not going to get used to that. So babies who have a diagnosis, or you suspect have a diagnosis of torticollis and plagiocephaly, they have autonomic nervous system dysregulation. So I'm saying that because they don't have access to their whole social nervous system. Talk about that in a minute. And also there's an interruption there, and they don't really have a range of motion problem. They have limited access to their innate movements, okay? So when you look at it like that and think about it's a functional problem, doing stretching and range of motion emphasis can actually be really harmful. Can cause more problems. So basically I'm going to go over 6 ways to treat this. In general, we're going to start with the polyvagal science and the social nervous system. So basically, we went over this the other day about there being 3 branches of the autonomic nervous system when redefined in the polyvagal theory. And it has a lot to do with the integration of the whole social nervous system. So cranial nerves 5, 7, 9, 10, and 11. And 11 is the accessory nerve, right? And it innervates sternocleidomastoid and traps, which we talked about. So we would treat torticollis like a social nervous system or a social engagement system issue because they only turn to one side. And they have no access to this other side. So it's actually a functional deficit. So we would go in through the polyvagal portals, most specifically through the face-heart portal, using eye gaze, facial expressivity, looking at symmetry from one side of the face to the other, which is a very common element of torticollis. I've never seen a baby with torticollis or plagiocephaly that has symmetry in their face. Through listening, through talking and cooing, and singing, humming, chanting, vibration through the vocal folds, encouraging vocal prosody, because sometimes you'll find that these babies don't have good vocal prosody, which is a measurement of vagal tone. You can listen to a baby's cry, and it'll let you know if their vagal tone is high, which remember we heard from Janine was good outcomes, and low and not so good. Through the posture, through position changes, through gravity, through movement, and through proprioception, which is massage and skin to skin and breastfeeding, all those good juicy things. And again, remembering the hierarchical structure of the social nervous system and what it is about torticollis and plagiocephaly, because it's sort of a functional movement problem, you want to be able to weave in experiences of socialization, which is a safety platform, with mobilization, because a lot of these babies are afraid of the movement because they've been stuck in this one position for a really long time, and that's all they know. So babies, anytime that something new comes at them, there's a learning curve for all of us actually, but especially for babies, and they're mostly vulnerable because they're brand new and they're learning how to regulate their nervous system. So weaving in safety experiences with mobilization is the way to go. And this means that we have to be very attuned to reading babies' subtle behavioral cues. Facial expressions, breathing patterns. Is the baby, a lot of times I'll notice babies with torticollis and plagiocephaly are more, they're mouth breathers more than they are nose breathers. And we all know that, nose breathing is supposed to be really inherently easy for babies. And what I would consider, plagiocephaly and torticollis is sort of an immobilized state, okay? That's not functional. We're going to go ahead and make sure, again, that all of these light switches are turned on. They're bilateral. So head turning and orienting, there should be another little circle over here to show you the bilaterality. And a lot of times when you get, like Carol was talking about, this ear will come forward if the flat spot's on this side, you'll get actual asymmetry in the sucking muscles and the facial muscles themselves. And so the jaw, the only single unpaired bone that has articulations on both right and left side of the body, will be impacted significantly. And for those of us who do what we do, we understand the implications of that. So also making sure that because the tongue is intimately connected in the middle here, that the pharyngeal and tongue muscles are all working. And this is, Melissa was mentioning, making sure the tongue lateralizes on both sides. That's a great technique too for torticollis and plagiocephaly. The second thing is baby yoga, and you can call it whatever you want. I like to call it baby yoga because I like to do yoga. But you could call it developmental movement, you could call it floor time, you could call it whatever you want. But I found in particular 3 poses have been helpful for babies with torticollis and plagiocephaly. And so I'm going to show you with Lois, okay? The first one is called the Henry. And some of you already know why it's called the Henry. This is my son's middle name, and I named it. This is the #1 best way to not do stretching with a baby. Okay? If you notice that a baby has a head-turning preference to one side, and by the way, all babies born have a head-turning preference to one direction. It's just how significant is that head-turning preference. So let's say Lois likes looking to the left, and she doesn't ever turn to the right. What you do is negotiate. Obviously, we're going to do social engagement and meeting the baby where they're at. And I always have the no gushing rule. You know, you don't want to come at a baby trying to get your jollies and fix off of a baby. You come at a baby to kind of blend in where they're at and just engage them socially and be able to follow their cues for when they need to take a break and when they can come back to that. So we're going to do all of that. That's the polyvagal part of it. So we want them to go to the right side. So the Henry is all about this. You gently and slowly encourage the baby to roll all the way over to the right side. Now, you will notice, like Lois is keeping her head here because she's immobilized through her head and neck, but this is what will happen. You will notice that the babies will keep looking up at the ceiling. So it's all right, because guess what? We have the wonderful effects of gravity, which after laying here for a little while, and you may notice that the baby's not comfortable right away lying on this side because they haven't been over here very much, obviously. So maybe, you know, the first couple times it's just about getting them to the right side and letting the effects of gravity, and look, they're still rotated, okay? They're on their side like this, they're still rotated. Wait, 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 and then the head will turn. So here they are lying on their right side. Now, they're going to be in a midline position. They're still not turned to the right side. And we'll wait here until the baby looks a little bit comfortable, and then what we do is you can gently support the head, or maybe sometimes that's not necessary, and allow the body to drop back to the surface with gravity and ease, and it goes exactly the way they need it to go. And now Lois is looking to the right, and it's very effortless, and it works every single time. So that's the #1 way to get a baby to turn their head to the direction that they don't want to turn it to. The Rollio, another personal favorite. The part of the treatment for this is, you know, don't just expect to be able to get the baby and do it, because these babies have head and neck issues and they have skull flattening most likely. And some babies with torticollis have less skull flattening than others, but they all have some element. That the issue is that you want to get the baby on their back and work on a midline head position for just a moment. Now, the younger the baby, the less they're able to maintain their head in the middle, because that's a piece of postural control. And what they're doing is, in the 4th trimester of life, is developing postural control. So by the time they're 3 months old, you want them to have very strong midline orientation. So the younger the baby, they may have to have a little bit of support to maintain their head in the middle, and that's just fine. What I do is I take the hand and the foot of the same side, grasp it with one hand, and a hand and a foot on the other side, and still engaging and going slow with the baby, watching their behavioral cues, going as slow as they need or as fast as they like. And my rule of thumb is if the baby's starting to look like it's a roller coaster, slow down. And if they look bored, you can speed up a little, okay? That's just one really easy. Another one, what I think the #1 is, just watch their breathing. Because remember that vagal tone is sort of a measurement between the heart period and the respiratory, and like the symphony between how your heart beats and how your lungs are breathing. So paying attention to the breathing, and once their breath quickens a little bit, slow down and pay attention to that. Pay attention to subtle things like nasal flaring. Just really go slow. So the Rollio goes like this. You get here, and then you just begin to rock side to side, okay? And I always start in small arcs, and then watching the baby for how they're responding, and the baby's having a great time. So now we're going to go side to side. And the eventual goal is to be able to roll the baby up to the side and have this cheek press into the surface, and then roll to this side, and that cheek touch into the surface. So it's an alternating, vacillating back and forth. And this does a body good. I don't have time to tell you exactly what. Just every single thing you can think of it helps with. So that's the Rollio. And then the last one is the guppy. So the guppy can be done many different ways. I like to do it on my lap or the parent's lap, and sometimes we can do it over a ball or, you know, any different thing. But basically what the guppy is, I would usually have the mom use her thigh, or I use my thigh, and I support the baby's head, because We also have protective extensions. If we go backwards, we do a little bit of a startle reflex. You just want to be a little bit ahead of that and not triggering the startle. So you go slow, and maybe you negotiate this backward movement. Because one of the things about the polyvagal theory that we learn with social engagement is, remember that one side might be a little sensitive to vestibular input. Remember I was telling you about the middle ear muscles that they can't really squeeze very well. So this may be a particularly difficult one, and I do find that. So just go really slow. So the first day may just be getting the baby really used to going backwards and letting the head go back. But eventually you'll see that. And these are both moms doing this, and I'm just using my baby doll. Not Lois, but I have my own baby doll. And there can be a little bit here, or there can be a lot. Now this baby went into it by herself, but do you see these red rings here? You know, that's the other thing we're looking for. That's another indication of torticollis, that if you're finding red rings, I always tell parents we're looking, in my tummy time classes, we'll go on an excavation and we will look for red rings, and we'll find them. We just want to open them up and do some kissing. There's this one, I haven't put it in here, but I'm going to go ahead and go over, and it's called, it's the necklace kiss. And I have the mom sort of dig in, and we kiss all the way around. You smell good, Lois. All the way around, because as we're like rooting our face up in the neck, because our faces, it's just easy and it's very gentle on the baby, you can really get in there and sort of mobilize some structures. The third one is just movement and access to all sides of the body. And we say 4 sides of the body, but there's lots of diagonals and things that are happening, but this is just one way to do it. And this little baby right here does have torticollis, and you can tell just by the facial asymmetry and sort of how the head's cocked and how the hands are laying on the floor. You see this? Because the palms really should be, and you want the length of the forearm, you want the elbow pressing down. He had torticollis too. They ended up having a sister who came later, and she had a less version of it. But you can tell even this was a really strong case of torticollis. It's like some residual, but I think he's like 3 or 4 here. But just doing tummy time and just getting on all aspects of the body. Here's doing tummy time with your brothers. And you can tell, you can just see a little bit of asymmetry, but she's working out a lot of her neck issues, and she does. The thing of it is, this baby actually has a head turning preference to the left, and she's turning to the right. And you will see babies who have a head turning preference, when you actually do get them belly down, they will sometimes turn their head the other way. And one other note about torticollis is when you're laying baby on their back and you notice that they like their head to the left. And then when you roll them over into tummy time, you notice that they like their head to the right. That's fairly common, actually. It's not always the same side. And I always want to see, because it just tells me a little bit different about the strain pattern, okay, and what's going on. Some babies will have the same side head preference, whether they're in supine or prone. So here's basically those 4 sides of the body that I'm telling you about. And I say enough already, because we live in a back-to-sleep culture, and so that's happening a lot. And it is a good place to play sometimes, but we're in that position a lot. We sleep on our backs, and we get in the bouncy seat in the swing, and we're held, and we're passed around, and so we get a lot of pressure. This is the front half of the body, and this is the back half of the body. And remember proprioception? We were telling you about that's your position in space and where you are and knowing where you're at. It needs pressure to develop. So if you're constantly putting pressure on the back side of your body, that's going to be well developed. But if your proprioceptors on this side of your body aren't getting enough input, that's going to cause an imbalance. So then we have right side lying, left side lying, which are very important, not only just as a transitional movement pattern, but also too for proprioception and getting enough pressure there. And then my favorite topic, which is tummy time. Oh, it's tummy time. I can sing. This is Oliver, who likes to do tummy time with his friends. And stuffed animal. He had a really strong case of torticollis, and this is his non-preferred side. So you see some tension happening. and a little bit, coming down the arm here. But he's working all of that out, so you don't have to do much. When babies are given access to different positions and pressure, we're innately healing organisms, and we will do that. Just like trusting in the birth process. Trust the baby in its movements against gravity. Are the tummy time pictures ever going to end? Nope. But this is really the essence of it, because this is the mom, the top of the mom's head. They're doing this together. Okay, so all of this stuff, especially play and anything we're working out in the first 3 months of life, really, we need to have a partner there with us. Remember, to stay in social engagement system, it's bidirectional and it's reciprocal. And this also helps when he sees his mom to feel safe. And that's really what we're all looking for at all times, to feel safe and loved and supported. And that's what happens here. Is much more willing to do it if the mom's down on the floor with him. And plus, she's like calling his name, and they're having a great time. Now, as far as what I want to show here is, look at this interest in the toy. This really comes after the baby's sort of mastered a little bit of the tummy time thing. They're working through a little bit of their torticollis. But what I want to talk about is this little roll thing underneath here. And those can be helpful and supportive, but just to remember that really what's ideal is to get this baby on a flat surface and really try not to use props if you can. Sometimes, for short periods of time, we may use something to make it easier, but because we're building in the context of safety with mobilization, we'll do it a little bit until the baby gets really comfortable with that, and then begin to remove all of the props, because many people want to use the boppy pillow and other things to prop them up. But if you always prop them up, by the way, they're going to have a bigger time having difficulty with that. So here you can see a little bit of facial asymmetry, but really the treatment here for him is pressing down with the elbow and the length of the forearm. See how this elbow is just a little bit popped up off the surface? He'll be working that. And it's a dynamic thing. It's a static picture. Another thing is just tummy time classes, this is what I do a lot. A couple times a week I teach classes, and I have a doll, and these parents are all doing this wonderful treatment. Because what I notice is usually in my tummy time classes, there are between 6 and 10 babies. About 80% of the babies have some element of torticollis and plagiocephaly. Now, in the literature, it's 46.9%, so it's still half of all babies. But these parents are well equipped. And what I do is instill confidence. Look at this. I love this, okay? This baby had a lot of problems with torticollis and plagiocephaly, and this mom, she's really giving him a lot of encouragement right now and really sort of filling his cup with love and understanding, getting him ready to work out his neck and head issues. And this is an experience of prolonged immobilization without fear. So being able to do long periods of time where you're on the ventral support surface and just relaxing and not maybe turning and lifting your head a lot, but just relaxing into the position. The other thing I'd like to say as a treatment is called tummy time napping, where you allow the baby to nap on their tummy. And you talk to parents about this very consciously, that you are awake and you are sort of supervising. But let's say baby falls asleep in tummy time, or maybe baby falls asleep in your arms. I like to teach the parents how to transition the baby, into tummy time napping as a treatment strategy. The fourth element is manual therapy, which is what we do. I'm going to include massage, which I do a little bit of. I'm certified in several different kinds of infant massage, but the most important and most impactful person to this is their caregiver. I use my doll a lot, and the parents do the treatment, because we all, again, have innate healing abilities, and to trust the babies to use their bodies in ways that are wise for them. And also to have a tensegrity approach and a whole body model of treatment, and not over-focus on the neck itself, or that it would be one muscle or even the sternocleidomastoid and the traps. It's just not the case. So the first thing is thinking about facial symmetry. So this is an example of facial asymmetry, and it's pretty obvious. But I like to look at obvious examples because then we can titrate down that and see more subtle examples of that. What I would prescribe for this baby, besides probably the Henry and some other things, would be facial massage. Because we're obviously needing some activation happening on this side. So I would show the mom how to massage the face, usually in the direction that the muscles go. It's very sweet, and it has a very big impact. I do, however, like the sternocleidomastoid muscle, and it is the head turner. So unilaterally, it does head turning. You see this popping out? Bilaterally, it tucks the chin. When we begin chin tucking, which is a very important aspect of treating torticollis plagiocephaly eventually, usually in the first month of life, you're not really working on chin tucking. But after that, like 2 months, 3 months, getting the baby's head in the middle, I'm going to go back to this, getting a midline head position. And I like to use my thumbs and my fingers like this, coming up and practicing a chin tuck in a pull to sit to help them activate bilaterally the sternocleidomastoid, or at least to get the sensation. Because when you're turned to one side and you're chronically sort of elongated and contracted, you're not really sure how to use that together. And so it's sort of like pre-coordination. And also, as far as massage goes, to massage this area. So I always tell the parents to find the little area behind the earlobe, which, by the way, we know that the sternocleidomastoid, one of the attachments is the mastoid process. Well, babies don't really have a mastoid process because they have very small bone ossification centers, but we develop a mastoid process over the first year of our life by turning our head. So we know from Wolff's Law that bones will grow based on how they're being pulled on. And that's how this little, everyone feel behind your ear and locate your mastoid process and actually bilaterally touch it. And are they perfectly symmetrical? You probably didn't have plagiocephaly or torticollis, but if you were born before 1995, you were sleeping on your belly. And in a belly sleeping culture, we don't really have torticollis and plagiocephaly because whatever in utero restrictions or whatever from pregnancy were worked out through pressure onto the tummy. But I teach parents to massage from the area just behind the earlobe all the way down to the sternum and all the way down to the clavicle. Works really well. Because what happens is, when I do it or when the parents do it, usually they get a little bit fussy, so we have to use social engagement, and then we're working on accessing both sternocleidomastoid. And same thing for the traps, really. They're huge, but just to massage that area from the back of the skull all the way along the whole scapula and down the entire thoracic body. Craniosacral therapy is particularly helpful because it's usually a connective tissue problem. Even I like to argue with my PT friends all the time as much as possible. They say, well, it's a muscular problem. Torticollis is a problem with muscles. Well, no, it really isn't a problem with the muscles because babies don't really have, especially early on babies in the first 3 months of life, 4 months of life, they don't really have active control. They're working on reflexes and they're working on active control and learning what it's like, but they're using a lot of and muscle tone isn't so much about, it's not so much about strength as it is the vitality of the system, okay? And how much access the baby has to their body and the movements and all the postural reflexes, and we have a whole slew of them. But in particular, I find that the diaphragms are very important. So we're going to talk about the pelvis, pelvic diaphragm, respiratory diaphragm, thoracic inlet, hyoid, cranial base, tent, all the way up. But the pelvis in particular, so if many of you have dug into the literature, Beryl Arbuckle, or any of the old, people who have looked at large numbers of babies, mostly in the osteopathic literature, the pelvis is a big indicator, okay? And the sacrum in general, and the entire reciprocal tension membrane. So if you see a kid with plagiocephaly, you're not just going to work on that side of the occiput. You're actually holding a three-dimensional container that has movement in some areas and not so much movement in other areas. But when you're placing your hands on the baby, you're trying to imagine, wherever you're at, that it's a three. You could hold the baby like this. It wouldn't be very good. You would be supporting the baby. And really particularly visualizing the dura and its invaginations, which in particular, the falx and the tent coming out like this, coming down the foramen magnum, it looks like a peace sign. It's the holographic nature of the universe, by the way. So we're taking that whole structure and how it moves in relationship, okay? Feel a lot of torsion or we don't feel anything at all. So treating the entire reciprocal tension membrane. And the cranial base, obviously. And this horrible word, TWYF, treat what you find. It seems like a cop-out sometimes, but when I was saying what is the problem with torticollis and plagiocephaly, there's a whole bunch of different reasons for that particular baby, okay? So you have to get in there and just see what feels like it's moving and what feels like it's not and what feels like it's imbalanced. And then obviously anything Carol's taught you, and I highly recommend if you haven't taken her training to do so, because in my opinion, she's doing a great job of particularly focusing on babies. And torticollis and plagiocephaly is half of the baby population. The tensegrity model, does everybody have this toy or some derivation of it? If you don't, get it. This is not my favorite picture, and it's not exactly what mine looks like. But basically what this is these are like the bones. So let's pretend like the wooden dowels are bones. And here's the connective tissue. You can see when you're playing with this toy, and babies love this toy, by the way, how movement in one part of it affects movement in the other. You can see how when you flatten it a little bit, what happens on the outside. So to take this into account, that when you have flattening on one side, that it's pushed everything out of whack, that you've got to take this whole entire structure into account. Not just the local area that you're treating to try to take a global perspective, but using your hands and trusting them to get local as they need to. And really just, what I find is just observe the changes. Where's the t-shirt that I have no idea what I'm doing? Because I would put it on. My three favorite, anybody heard anatomy trains? Everybody familiar with that? This is the superficial front line, and I guess you can imagine why this might be. This is what helps us to understand the tensegrity model, because it's the entire musculo-fascial container here, including the sternocleidomastoid from both sides, down the mediastinal area to the pubic symphysis. Remember we were learning about the descended sacrum and putting some pressure on the pubic symphysis. That little technique you can definitely use here. You can see the applications to this, even though this baby not qualify for a descended sacrum. But this whole train actually goes down to the toes, and it comes up to the hips, and then it's sort of a continuation, but this is still one structure. So you could be treating down here and having an amazing effect all the way up here, and just to remember that when we're assessing for torticollis and plagiocephaly, you might see this torque down here, and that's just sort of like it's taking it up at the end. This is the deep front line. This is the one with tongue ties, okay? Because I find that babies that have a tongue tie have a higher incidence of torticollis and plagiocephaly than babies who don't. Because you can imagine if you have a midline restriction, that makes it even more difficult than it already is. One of the things I want to say about tummy time really quickly is they say, my baby hates it. Well, your baby has neck and head dysfunction. That's why they hate it. It's very particularly hard, so we would use the polyvagal theory to meet the baby where they're at, follow their autonomic states, and gently move in context of safety with movement little bits at a time. Because we're talking about a functional thing. We're not talking anatomy here. This is a functional activity. But this is considered the body's myofascial core, and it actually starts on the underside of the foot, goes up the underside of the foot, the back of the leg, crosses over the top of the knee, the thigh, comes up here and grabs the psoas, incorporates the entire respiratory diaphragm, goes up, incorporates the mediastinal areas, and ends at the tongue. I like doing that. Feels good. So keeping these trains in mind can help, I think it just helped my palpatory experience. You might want to experience that. Then for tummy time, one of the most important ones is a superficial back line, which starts on the bottom of the foot, and it sort of bifurcates here and then picks back up, back of the leg, the sacrum, all along the spine, this huge piece here over the top of the head, and ends right here. That when you're in the womb, you are in physiological flexion. You're like this. And once you come out, you've learned a lot about flexion in the womb. When you start to come out, your story for the next several months or so is to learn about extension. And for that to happen, it engages this entire piece of fascia. So this can be another reason why tummy time is really difficult if they don't have access to that. This is one of my favorite authors, and artists, illustrators. If you don't know about Danny Quirk, then you should look him up. He is fantastic. And he's doing a bunch of sets of drawings for Tom Myers about the fascial trains. And this is an adult, obviously. I've been talking to him about doing some baby work, and we'll see. But he's got some amazing images. Is anybody familiar with his work? He's pretty well known. And I actually know him in person. This is an interesting story. If you're interested in that, talk to me later. Yeah. But he also paints on people with latex paint and then uses a Sharpie marker to, like you're seeing inside the body. He's like got this one where he's like ripping open his rib cage and his heart's there. It's just really amazing work. Then the fifth one is reflexes, which is, almost my favorite one. I loved Barbara's talk this morning about just trusting the baby because they know. It's like, this is what it's there for. And for me, I tend to get a bit passionate about this part of the topic because I believe that we all deserve access to all of our innate abilities. And part of what's happening with our modern parenting and lifestyle practices is that we're not making sure that our babies have access to all of their innate faculties. Because if you're lying on your back all the time, you cannot access these reflexes, okay? You have to be bellied down to the earth. You have to be on the ventral surface to have a head lifting response, to have a head turning response. Now you can do rooting. But the rooting response, if you're gonna use reflexes to help treat torticollis and plagiocephaly, so Lois likes looking left, I can use the right rooting reflex to stimulate that. And you will notice that that side won't root as well. So that's what we call an inhibited reflex response. Because even though they're automatic and programmed in, like Carol said, once you're stuck there, you kind of stay there. So working on that can do many good things beyond getting the baby to turn their head, actually. Because remember I said, it's not a range of motion problem. I've never met a baby, and I've been working at a children's hospital for 16 years, never met a baby who doesn't have the range of motion, okay? Because range of motion is a joint thing. Another one is the auditory orienting reflex, and this comes on really, really strongly about 2 months. So you can use your voice, and especially the mother's voice. The baby's turning left. Lois. Now you want to get down low enough so that when they're locating the voice, they're actually going to be turning all the way. Lois. And this in particular works in tummy time as well. Lois. And waiting, because it takes time for babies to respond, giving them access to that. And you'll see that their auditory orienting reflex to that side doesn't work as well, but you keep working on it and keep little bits at a time, it will. And then they'll be turning their head. But it can be hard because, like Carol said, when you roll the bowling ball and it's flat on one side, it'll turn over there. Time's up, folks. So you can look at these reflexes, and the gallant is my favorite one. Let's go over that really, really quickly. That's where you hang the baby over your hand, and stroke alongside the spine. So you'll notice this is always asymmetrical in babies with torticollis and plagiocephaly. So you stroke along the spine, and when you do this, the body goes to that side. And then you go like this, and the body goes to that side. But you'll notice one side will obviously not be extrapolating itself. So if you just run over these reflexes really quickly, you will get a lot of postural responses that will have a positive effect on the head and neck. Toe grasp, palmar grasp, you'll see one side's different. Just go over it. And head lifting and orienting, you have to be right now tummy down to do that. The gravity has to be coming this way for you to go that way. All right, and to turn your head and lift it. Very quickly, oh my goodness, I want to talk about this, and maybe during the thing. So the last one is just teaching parents about positioning and infant furniture. And these seating things are big culprits. Just say no to bumbo. I call it the bimbo, but just say no to bumbo. No bumbos. Can I hear it? No bumbos. All right. The bumbo is a seat that has a little pommel horse. And I get, like, the number 14th thing that's wrong with it is that it has a dip in the back of it that puts the baby in a posterior pelvic tilt. And we're teaching our kids a dumbification of America, by the way. I have a whole list of things that are, but limit the time to really short periods of time and just avoid propping as much as possible. I mean, being held is not propping, but avoid propping your babies in anything and highly discourage sleeping in any device at all. Part of the treatment, I'm going to take one more minute, is to observe how your infant arrives to the session. And I always love it when they arrive without their car seat. But they do arrive in their car seat. And they'll keep arriving in their car seat, even though I say, you know, our challenge for next session is for him to come in without his car seat. But that still happens. But just notice how they look in the seat, because here you are. And I show the parent at the end of the session how to get their baby in the car seat, and this is part of the treatment. So what I do is I have the car seat here, and I will put them in high and let them slide down. Then I scoop underneath, just like Carol did, sitting on my hands, slide underneath their butt and make sure both ischial tuberosities have the seat available to them. And then move up the body, getting the rib cage and the shoulders as best you can, and head and neck position as best you can, maybe to the non-preferred side. And just encourage the parent to do that every single time. This conscious way of putting them in their car seat can make a big difference. And talking about sleep, we already said tummy time napping, and that in a back-to-sleep world, in a safe sleep, which the transition from back to sleep to safe sleep looks like this. Back to sleep was just be on your back. Safe sleep means it's the ABCs. You're alone on your back in a crib. And that's the plan for our country coming up. So if we're going to have a back-to-sleep, safe sleep environment, and all babies have a head preference, true or false, the parent needs to take responsibility for that other side, and that's part of the treatment. That your baby really likes to look left, you got to come in and help the baby turn to the other side. 50% this way, 50% that way. And babies should never, never, never lie on the back of their head for sleeping, ever, 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 until they do it by themselves. This is a really horrible thing. Brachycephaly is much more of a bitch than plagiocephaly. Thank you very much.
Gosh, about 2, maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2, more like that. I'm a lactation consultant and a craniosacral therapist and a psychologist, which is a really interesting blend of things to be. And I've been in practice as a lactation consultant for 30 years, so I have a tremendous amount of experience. But my job was relatively easy because I just got to do the fun stuff of, like, supporting them and counseling them and cheerleading them on, and occasionally taking care of a sore nipple or some positioning and a latch-on technique, and then epidurals hit the scene. And all hell broke loose. And then from there, it was just a downhill slide. And then roundabout, when was it? When they started inducing at 39 weeks. And then that slid down to 38 weeks. And then in my community of Columbus, Ohio, 37 weeks inductions for medical reasons, right? And so the vacuum extraction rate went like this because they didn't use forceps in my community because forceps can hurt the baby, right? So they got that one right, but then they used the substitution of vacuum extraction. And so here I am as a lactation consultant trying to work with breastfeeding, coming at this from more of a therapeutic stance and having to use more and more of my craniosacral skills in order to rectify the suck, swallow, breathe problem that came about as a result of the vacuum extraction. So then I thought when the CDC came out and said, no, 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 you're not allowed to do that anymore. You have to have a board review to even do an induction at 39 weeks. I thought, thank God, glory be. Now we're on the easy slide up and I can retire soon. Yeah, well, that didn't happen. And so what happened instead is torticollis and plagiocephaly. So this is the scourge of, and the bane of my existence as a lactation consultant is trying to figure out yet once again another fucking catastrophe that we have to deal with. Okay, now even though breastfeeding is like this really wonderful tonic for these babies with torticollis and plagiocephaly, they can't suck worth a damn. Okay, and many of these mothers, the number one reason for stopping breastfeeding prematurely, weaning prematurely, is sore nipples. Okay, and you're going to see here that these babies have a jaw clench, and they are causing those sore nipples. So these, now we're getting on to 45%, half of babies. One more reason why mothers are not going to breastfeed their babies. So we really have a dilemma. Okay, so when we start to think about suck, swallow, and breathe, we have to take into consideration anatomy, physiology, structural integrity, and all of the various impacting factors that can play a role. And when it gets down to what we do as craniosacral therapists and as lactation consultants, we have to consider that cranial nerves plus brainstem function plus structural integrity equals suck, swallow, breathe coordination or the lack thereof. So if any one of these parts here are whoppy-jawed, are not functioning correctly, then we're going to see it reflected in suck, swallow, breathe coordination. Now, suck, swallow, breathe coordination is our sign that a baby is okay. If there is any deficit in suck, swallow, and breathe, they're not okay. Now, the big problem here is that physicians don't know shit squat about suck, swallow, and breathe coordination. Okay? And so they're not the ones who are going to be in a position to recognize this. Now, here's the other thing, and I'm going to throw my profession under the bus. Lactation consultants don't know shit squat about suck, swallow, breathe coordination either. Except for some of us, okay, who have taken the time or have taken some sort of extra training program that endows us with the skills to be able to properly assess suck, swallow, and breathe coordination, and then to have an inkling about where to go from there. All right, so let's talk about a few specifics about suck, swallow, and breathe coordination to kind of clue you into some of the ways that you can begin to be aware of where you put your hands and what you need to do. And I'm going to say this right up front, and Michelle and I go round and round about this, don't we, in our discussions. And Michelle does this nice, beautiful, gentle, time, pacing thing that's really luxurious, and it's so yummy, and I'm just going, oh my God, that would be so great if I could implement that in my own practice. But the reality is that when you have a suck, swallow, breathe problem, you are under the gun to get a result. It's got to get taken care of, and it has to get taken care of really, really quickly. And I mean, sometimes you even have to step in before 36 hours of age with that mother and baby and say, oh my goodness, we've got an issue here. We're going to be sure that you get the kind of care and help that you need to keep the mother from quitting, because 50% of the women who say they intend to breastfeed are no longer breastfeeding on day 2. Okay, that's appalling. Now your community here is extraordinary. Portland, Oregon, extraordinary. Columbus, Ohio, completely different. Okay, and that's the reality of it. Now, lactation consultants who are starting to get savvier about all of this and are starting to, hear the words craniosacral therapy, and craniosacral therapy is really, really wonderful, are going to start to knock on your door and say, will you please help me? Okay, and it's really important for you to know how to do that. It's really important for you to know what good suck, swallow, and breathe looks like, and what you can specifically do to aid the suck, swallow, and breathe coordination per se, alongside of all of these lovely general things to do in terms of helping the baby's alignment to change and their function to change. Okay, so the tongue position is everything in breastfeeding. And if that tongue is not over the lower gum line and is cupping and peristalsing and creating a pressure differential inside the mouth and setting up the swallow correctly, then you're not going to have good suck, swallow, and breathe coordination. So repeat after me. Tongue position is everything in breastfeeding. Tongue position is everything in breastfeeding. That's right. So what I want you to do right now is put your tongue right up behind your upper teeth, right up there. Just gently close your mouth without like this and swallow. How easy was that? Not? Okay, maybe you were tongue thrusting. That is the correct position of the tongue. That's the correct resting position for a nice, gentle swallow. Now, baby has their mouth open. When they are swallowing correctly, they're going to have their tongue up in a position forming a teat on the breast. They're going to get on there, and their tongue is going to rise. And then they're going to do a peristaltic wave, and as their tongue drops down at the back, that's going to create a pressure differential, and that's going to pull milk out of the breast. And then the back of the tongue is going to hump in such a way right up here, like this, and it's going to throw the bolus of milk to the back of the throat. And that's going to set off a reflex action of swallowing that the pharyngeal constrictor muscles are then going to take that bolus down without endangering breathing in the process. Now, there are 4 valves that are required to make that happen. The valving of the tip of the tongue against the teat, formed by pulling the breast back into the mouth. The S spot, the juncture between the hard and the soft palate, are just directly in front of that. Then we have the nasopharynx, this is number 3, the closing off the soft palate, and that opens up this space, and that creates that negative pressure to pull that bolus out. Then we have the epiglottis right here, and this epiglottis is going to flop down over the larynx as the larynx rises up underneath it. And that laryngeal closure at the laryngeal vestibule is our 5th valve, and then our 6th valve right in here is the opening up of the upper esophageal sphincter. Wow, that's complex, isn't it? Okay, we're going to see it in action. This is what it looks like on the outside. We have a baby who's deeply attached to the breast. We've got some really good tongue peristalsis because we don't have any kind of excessive compression here, and we don't have over-opening of the mouth. Now let's look at it from the inside. Tongue, nipple, soft palate over in here. Look at the ramping of this. Now, most of all, I want you to look at the rhythmicity. This is really well timed. This is what normal breastfeeding looks like on the inside. Right here. The milk's coming out.
Where it's dark.
No, this is the tongue. Here's the tongue. Here's the nipple.
Okay.
Here's the hard palate.
Yeah.
And what's the very bottom?
You know what? I'm not real good at reading these ultrasounds, so I don't know how to instruct you as to what these structures are in here. Ultrasounds are, to me, they're like, what? Okay, now let's look at a barium swallow so you can see the direction of the milk. Okay, now this is bottle feeding, and babies should bottle feed the same way they breastfeed. Okay? A baby who's a dysfunctional bottle feeder is a dysfunctional bottle feeder. And we have a real opportunity to instruct parents as to how to do that correctly with horizontal feeding position and proper teat use. Now here it is in slow motion. You can see all those valves operating together rhythmically. Okay, now there are 6 out of 12 cranial nerves that govern suck, swallow, breathe coordination. It is a complex phenomenon that is ushered in by the use of developmental reflexes, okay? And then it will cement over time. The only thing that matures, it's mature at 40 weeks gestation. The only thing that matures past that is the baby's personal style. Same ones that Michelle has been talking about for the social nervous system. When a baby has good coordination of suck, swallow, and breathe, what do you suppose they're developing and maturing? Okay, now of note, and I really want to emphasize the role of the brainstem in suck, swallow, breathe dysfunction, and the opportunity that you have as craniosacral therapists is to be sure that you get in there and work with the brainstem, with the various nuclei that are available there, and with the positioning of the brainstem. In my experience, in working with a lot of these babies, their brainstems have been moved to one side or the other, up or down. Okay, and maybe that movement is only this much, very, very little, but it's enough to disrupt the works in there, okay? So of special note are going to be the nucleus solitarius, the nucleus ambiguus, the hypoglossal nucleus, and in the purple right behind here, you can see the dorsal motor nucleus of the vagal nerve. Okay, that's part of the autonomic parasympathetic nervous system. Nucleus ambiguus is part of our social nervous system. Okay, right in here. It plays a huge role in suck, swallow, breathe coordination. Our cranial nerves include the trigeminal nerve, which is huge. It has both a sensory and a motor component. Gargantuan nerve. It's doing a lot in suck, swallow, breathe coordination. Then we have our facial nerve, which of course is going to play a role in the raising and lowering of the larynx and the tongue. Amongst other things, the glossopharyngeal nerve, which alongside of the vagal nerve and the spinal accessory nerve are controlling the swallow and the protection of the airway. And then the hypoglossal nerve, which Michelle didn't go into much, is in total control, motor control of the tongue. Okay, so you're going to pay special attention to the nucleus solitarius, the nucleus ambiguus, the hypoglossal nucleus, and the spinal accessory nucleus. In addition to that, you will pay attention to the various foramina that these cranial nerves exit the skull through. So the foramen ovale, the foramen rotundum, the facial canal, the jugular foramen, where we have 3 nerves, the spinal accessory, the vagal, and the glossopharyngeal all exit the skull through this foramen. And of course, the hypoglossal canal. And to see these a little bit differently, here's our spinal accessory nerve going from the spine up through the foramen magnum, and is going to come twist around and come back down through the jugular foramen. This is the hypoglossal canal where the hypoglossal nerve exits. So one of the things you also want to be aware of is what's happening with these occipital condyles here. Are they migrating? Because you have a suture here, you have a suture here, a suture here, and a suture here. Okay, and you can get into those sutures and you can release restrictions in that so that you can relieve this condylar migration that is going to both impair the journey of the spinal accessory nerve and the journey of the hypoglossal nerve out of the hypoglossal canal. In addition to that, what's happening with the basilar portion of the occiput can determine what's going on with our three nerves that are helping to coordinate the swallow to protect the airway. So that's the glossopharyngeal nerve, again, the vagal nerve, and the spinal accessory nerve. And then we have our trigeminal ganglion right in here. I've removed the foramina through which this passes through. But if you get out an atlas like I was doing last night to remind myself, now where exactly is the foramen ovale and the rotundum? I get them mixed up. And then our facial nerve right in here is coming through the facial canal out through the sternomastoid foramen from the temporal bone. Okay, now, I'm not going to go through all these muscles. I'm terrible at muscle names, et cetera, et cetera. The key point I want to make here is how many layers there are to the neck musculature and how many of those layers are going to be involved in torticollis and plagiocephaly and what those muscles, when they are restricted, are going to do to the position of the cranium on top of the neck. Your opportunity is to go in here and palpate all of these structures, really get your hands on there. Oftentimes the babies love you just holding this area and just gently reminding them, you know what, this could be a different way. Okay, just to get down a little bit further into the musculature and the alignment of these structures in here, I pay special attention to the nuchal ligament right in here and the anterior ligament and the prevertebral fascia that is going to enclose all of this, of which that is a part of that fascia, because these are going to be very tight. Extremely tight on these babies, and when you get these released, it's going to help with that jaw clench. It's going to help to open up the area as well as taking care of any kind of subluxations or any kind of pull here at the occipital triangle. Oftentimes we have to pay special attention to this area and release it. This is just noting where the passage out. Here's the hypoglossal nerve in this area, and here's our three nerves that control the swallowing. Okay. Lots going on. This is like Union Station in New York City at rush hour, okay? Tons of stuff to pay attention to. There's going to be restrictions in one, some, or all of these areas, and in order to free up the tongue enough to help with the coordination of suck, swallow, and breathe, you're going to have to pay attention to it all. That's a lot to hold in your intention, and yet it must be done. Okay, and we've talked about the trapezius and the sternocleidomastoid muscle, the spinal accessory nerve. That's all going to be another area. Now, I find that when I have, even if there's not a fibrous tumor in the sternocleidomastoid muscle, you can oftentimes find some bunchiness in here on the affected side. And I will just go in there and I will just gently hold right in there and just gently, intentionally go down layer after layer after layer, and I will feel lengthening and release. It's like melting butter with my hand position. And that's going to eventually get this to come up and for the tongue to come forward. Okay, now I'm going to have you do a few little tongue exercises here, but you're going to need a partner to do it because I want you to face one another so that you can see what's going on with one another's tongue. Okay, so here, let me set it up for you. What I want you to do right this second is stick your tongue at one another. Stick it out. Okay, now I want you to note in the other person whether or not you see any asymmetry whatsoever in the sticking out of that tongue at you. That will give you a clue as to which side of that person's neck is restricted. Okay, then now the next thing I want you to do, have one of you go first and then the other go second. And really note, now I want you to keep your tongue sticking out like that, and then I want you to turn your head. Just drop it over to the side and notice what happens. Okay, so you're going to stick out your tongue, drop your head over to the side onto your shoulder. Notice what happens to the tongue when you do that. And then do it to the other side. Once you've done that, then I want you to repeat the exercise, except for I want you to add a twist. So you're going to drop your head over, and then you're going to turn your head this way and then this way, and notice what happens to your tongue. Okay? When you drop your head to one side or the other, that side of the tongue should pull back slightly. Okay, so you'll see the asymmetry emerging. This is why babies need to come onto the breast aligned correctly. Okay? When you also then drop and turn, the tongue is going to be pulled back even farther. Okay? So this gives you an idea of what happens with the Torticollis and Plagiocephaly babies, because they have the head tilt and they have a rotation pattern. There's a rotation pattern all the way down through the body, and that's going to include the tongue. And part of that's through the deep fascial line, but part of that's just through the natural mechanics of how all of this is connected together and works together. So if you're not familiar with the structural aspects of what's going on in this area, get out your netters, take a look, follow it along, and start putting your hands on your babies and feeling what's going on in here. Okay? This is why there's always going to be a deviated larynx in this process. And when you have a deviated larynx, there's going to be a problem with coordinating the swallow with the breathing. Now, I'm just going to say a little bit here about photai. It is really important that you understand that this tongue can get pulled back into the throat and get pressure put on the mouth floor and make a lingual frenulum look like it's tighter or shorter than it actually is. Okay? We have 45% of babies who are now affected by Torticollis Plagiocephaly constellation. What you're seeing, or what lactation consultants are erroneously diagnosing, it's not tongue tie. It's structural problems that are pulling the tongue back into the throat, okay? We have an overdiagnosis problem, not an increase in incidence. And in fact, there's new research coming out of Australia that demonstrates that the incidence has not changed, okay? So some populations may have a higher incidence due to the MTHFR gene mutation, if in fact that is playing a role with the midline defect of tongue tie. Mexicans, 40% of the population affected by MTHFR. Italians, 4%. Okay? So we're still at the beginning of our discussion on all of this. But we have an overdiagnosis problem of tongue tie because, again, lactation consultants, they're grasping at straws to try and figure out and rectify the problems. And it's not rectifying the problem. We're just having a backlash now. And now physicians are saying, you people are fucking nuts. And we're not going to pay attention to you at all because you're diagnosing everything as tongue tie. And you know what? That's the truth. So we, as body workers, have this unique opportunity to be able to go in there and correct these things structurally so that tongue can be placed correctly in the mouth for good suck, swallow, breathe coordination. Now, we have all kinds of neck fascia, multiple layers of neck fascia that are going to be involved in this process. Of particular note is going to be this prevertebral fascia here, as noted by the arrows. That's our kind of brownish looking here. All right, and then our deeper buccopharyngeal fascia, which is part of the deep fascial line that Michelle was talking about earlier. Okay, now our signs again are lateral head translation or tilt, our head rotation, our asymmetrical posture of the head and neck, and our misshapen head. And here are common presentations, which Carol showed us earlier. And here's my client Isaac, which if we have time, I'll show you the video of this. But you can see here that he had torticollis. Well, he still has the torticollis, and because of the back sleeping that he was doing, he now has plagiocephaly. So we have a very complex problem here. Always, 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 with these problems, we also have subluxation of the bony spine. And that can be both in the upper cervical area and down in the lower back area. So working on the hips is part of the process of working with suck, swallow, and breathe coordination. Whenever there's subluxation of C1 through C3, you're also going to see a jaw clench. And when that jaw clenches, the tongue pulls back. Specifically, our breastfeeding compromise is laryngeal deviation, jaw clench, asymmetrical tongue posture, as you just experienced through that exercise, tension that pulls the head away from the breast. So if Lois were going to breast, but she had a torticollis right here, and she was going to breast like this, but she also had a rotation, then what's going to end up happening is that she's going to constantly be pulling downward. This really poses a challenge for the mother to keep Lois in proper alignment when she goes on to the breast, and to get her mouth open wide enough so that she can get her on deeply. We also have shallow latch problems, which causes sore nipples as well as the jaw clench. These babies, because their social nervous systems are blown out, they're in fight-flight, they may resist going to breast at all, and oftentimes we will see babies going to breast and going like this. This is a clear sign. When the mother puts them down there, they might immediately start this or arm cycle or start to do all kinds of signs that they are in a lot of tension and stress, and that this is just one more thing that's added to their stress plate. And mothers often interpret that as being rejected. And my baby doesn't like my breast. My baby doesn't like my milk. My baby doesn't like me. So we have a tense, irritable baby, which adds another layer on top of the whole breastfeeding challenge. We have a defensive baby. The tongue is now pulled back into the throat. We then have peristalsis deficits, and then our suck, swallow, breathe compromise. And our cranial nerves are malfunctioning, and the brainstem is not getting the proper messages, nor is it spitting out the proper messages. Now, one of the things that mothers will complain about most is these vasospasms that they have, or they have this stripe across the nipple. Have you all heard about this? And it's oftentimes misdiagnosed as yeast infection or as Raynaud's phenomenon. It's neither one of those things. It is neuralgia as the result of inflammation of the nerve. That has occurred because of the compression on the nipple from the jaw clench. And then we have a lot of tissue breakdown, and I've seen third-degree wounds on these mothers' nipples. It's a horrible sight to see. And so the lactation consultant may be temporarily taking the baby off the breast for very legitimate reasons of enabling this to heal up enough so that as the baby's getting rectified, that their problems are getting rectified, that those nipples are going to be able to withstand the baby going back to the breast. The lactation consultant's role is to do the lactation therapy, at least those ones who are well equipped to do so. And it behooves you to make friends with the competent people in your community. And so you may have to do an interview, go and watch them work, etc., so that you can determine whether or not they are skilled enough to really be the right person for you to be referring to. And they're going to refer to you for structural work. And then they're going to continue to do their lactation therapy. They should not be abandoning the mother at this point, okay? Just because you're entering the picture and you're doing your care doesn't mean they stop doing their care. So if the lactation consultant has a tendency to wash their hands, then perhaps they're not skilled enough to handle these kinds of problems. The craniosacral therapist is going to do their structural assessment. They're going to do the various treatments for the torticollis and be very specific in aiming for restoring suck, swallow, breathe coordination. And then they refer back to the lactation consultant, or they work in tandem and side by side. I'm really lucky in that I'm both. And right in that same session, if that baby needs craniosacral therapy, I'm doing it alongside of the lactation work. And this is a very seamless way to do it. And it's given me a lot of pleasure. And I'm sort of like sort of like the squeaky wheel, because I keep on talking about craniosacral therapy and its magic, and I wish more lactation consultants were also trained as craniosacral therapists to sort of get over that continuity of care issue. So what specifically the lactation consultant will be working on is the baby's latch, nipple wound healing. They're going to help the mother to support her milk supply. They're going to do some sort of alternative feeding plan as needed. And one of the things that bugs me most is when the other therapists I refer to start to monkey around with this, okay? My choices about what alternative feeding method I am using are very specific to my lactation therapy goal, okay? And so when somebody second guesses that and undermines that care plan by suggesting that the mother do this over here, it really fucking pisses me off. So don't do it to your lactation consultant, please. Okay. Then you support the mother emotionally. The lactation consultant is going to do that counseling piece, hopefully, and is going to correct the suck, swallow, and breathe if they're trained to do so. And then they can do some of the things that Michelle has so artfully talked about in terms of facial massage. And you're going to see, well, I'm not doing body mapping in this particular presentation, but skin-to-skin contact and the laid-back breastfeeding. What the craniosacral therapist can do, alongside of what the lactation consultant is doing, is to help to reestablish the midline reference, to work on the hips and the low back, and we had a wonderful discussion about that this morning, to release the OA. Okay, I'm giving you my expertise here, a little bit of tidbit on 3 things are going to happen in order for the suck, swallow, breathe to normalize. The OA has to be completely released. The OCB has to be completely released. And the ethmoid has to be completely released. When all those 3 things are released, then the brainstem is going to drop into its normal position. Okay? And when you aim to get all of those things done, you're working on all the other structures in order to achieve those goals. Okay? So if you keep in your intention that these three things have to happen in order to normalize the suck, swallow, and breathe, then you're going to be going for it with a real clear intention. Okay, and of course any kind of direct work on the tort site and working on the cranial sutures is going to be of great assistance. Do we have time for me to show this video?
No.
Okay, can I?
What's it showing?
If we have time, I'll go back. How about that? It's just showing me treating. It's all right.
Let's take some questions and then we'll...
Okay, can I do this first? This is my pet. What, the treatment? This here? Yeah, okay. So, well, they have all this already on the file. Okay, here's my rant.
It'll be there.
Yeah. Bullshit on the Back to Sleep campaign.
Yeah.
I call bullshit on it. Number 1, it reduces access to the mom for nighttime breastfeeding with all the subsequent problems this can generate. Shit on back to sleep. Back sleeping overactivates sympathetic arousal, hypermeroflex, which may generate a state of anxiety for life via brainstem wiring and neurotransmitter programming. Okay? This is not a small thing, it's a big thing. It causes head flattening. It causes head flattening and subsequent motor and cognitive delays. These delays persist into school age and may create learning problems. They develop a vertical orientation rather than a rotational one, and this causes impaired vestibular development and may contribute to learning problems later in childhood. That's the baby. It worsens torticollis. It causes plagiocephaly and subsequent motor and cognitive delays, may cause scoliosis. Causes improper orientation of the eustachian tubes leading to ear infections. Dampens development of the social nervous system, the prime functional survival mechanism. The prime functional survival mechanism. Impairs proper development of motor sequence leading to developmental and cognitive delays. Motility equals mobility. It prevents babies from getting into deep delta brain rhythm, folks. This is our rest, renew, repair, and grow. May create sleep issues later in childhood mimicking ADHD. We wonder why we have a rise in ADHD. It ain't that, it's a sleeping problem. Keeps babies away from their moms. An unsafe sleeping condition physically, emotionally, and psychologically. Okay. You'll have it on the DVD.
Don't pinch. Don't pinch. Yeah, pinches are out.
Okay, now remind me again, was he our transfer lie? What was his intrauterine lie position?
He was head down, but he was more. They were both okay. So the majority of the pregnancy they were transfers. Week 32, he went head down.
Okay, so he was the first to go head down. Okay, so you were head down, young man, from 32 weeks on. Were they were vaginal, both of them?
C-section.
C-section, okay.
So he was also the first to be delivered.
So you were baby A, and this is Isaac.
Oh yeah. He was also the smaller twin. So he's 6 pounds 13 ounces. Oh. Yeah. Are you getting hungry again? What do you think? Maybe? You looking?
Isaac Davis. Isaac Davis.
Okay.
Hi, love. What you do?
We'll go to the table. Just a little bit of fun. Oh, yeah, I keep her.
Let me just move your hand slightly. You can just move it right there instead. Thank you.
Can we wiggle a little bit? Do some pushing?
Here, I'm talking to her.
Oh. Oh, yeah? You think so? You do? Yeah. You sure?
Not bad, Mom. Does it hurt at all?
What do you think? That's a silly noise. It's okay. It's okay. Oh, yeah? Yeah, it's okay. Oh, it's all right. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. Come back this way. Come back this way.
burps too?
Oh, and spit up.
Oh, goodness.
You can just grab a blanket or whatever.
It's been a spit uppy week on me. It must be summertime.
Okay.
It must be summertime.
Come on.
Summer. I got all sorts of messy. All sorts of
Let's try and burp.
There we go.
Okay.
Let's try and burp. Let's work on that other desk. Position for a while. Yeah. Yeah, you found those fingers. Yes, you did. Your brother found his fingers. Oh. Yeah. Oh my. That's right. You tell all about it. All about it. What'd you find up there? What'd you see? Did you find the windows and the curtains? Yeah. Are you telling me about it? Are you guys holding hands? Did you find each other? Yes, you did. That's your brother. Say hi. I know who that is, lady. You don't gotta tell me.
Isaac's so much calmer, isn't he?
Yeah. One of the other big differences with Nathan is he has a mobile that he lays underneath, and he's able to grab it and shake it now. And that was something that he wasn't able to do a week ago. And we were like, oh my gosh.
Awesome.
We thought it was by coincidence, but it's like he's visualizing it and going for it.
We oftentimes see like a developmental leap that would have been there anyway. It just speeds it up. Can you stick out your tongue, Isaac? Can you stick out your tongue? Can you stick it out?
Suggestion how to talk to the mom about not putting their babies on their backs.
You mean for sleeping or for play?
For sleeping.
So what I do is I tell them that the Back to Sleep program is controversial. And I also tell them that, amazingly, the Wikipedia page that describes SIDS and the Back to Sleep program are very well written pages. There are many, many authors, which improves the accuracy, and lots of research sites to back the various points of view. And that's a really easy place to send parents to get a whole bunch of information and make their own decisions.
Thank you. Anyone else? Michelle or Alison?
I work at a children's hospital, so I spend half the time in one world and half the time in the other. And basically, I just try to do whatever is adaptive as much as possible, tummy time napping, and talking to them about turning the head from side to side, taking responsibility for that, and then lots of floor time, lots of baby yoga and movement. I mean, that's just how I balance it.
In the lactation world, we advocate co-sleeping because co-sleeping is going to vary that baby's infant sleeping position. It's also going to give them skin-to-skin contact, and the mother and the baby are going to synchronize, and the mother will arouse the baby. So the mother is in training the baby to arouse, and that matures the brainstem.
Absolutely. The expanded sleep guidelines in 2011 that were published do recommend room sharing without bed sharing. So I'll go that avenue as well. That it's really nice for your baby to be in the same room, and I just hope they co-sleep after that as well. Next. Stand up.
If you have a baby that might be opiate dependent and now in treatment with mom where there's not co-sleeping allowed, what do you suggest the way to start that conversation with community partners to try to readjust that rule so that...
Readjust what rule?
The rule of no co-sleeping, because the babies are often substance exposed, especially opiate dependent or methamphetamine. So, and there's not co-sleeping allowed in the treatment facilities once the babies are born positive for drugs.
Well, so you have to decide who's a good candidate and who's not, okay? Because that's part of safe sleeping. Mm-hmm. But, you know, having the literature in front of you, these people who go nuts by depicting knives in the bed with the baby, you know, is a ridiculous scare tactic that is not grounded in the research whatsoever. So there's a big sleep conference coming up here in the California area in March. You know, that's a place to go to get accurate information about this. So the people who are behind the Back to Sleep campaigns are not using the totality of the research. Okay.
Would you suggest the midwives, lactation consultants, RNs be the ones to introduce this information to?
We all need to introduce this information. We need to battle this. This was it's a shitty public health strategy that was based on a bunch of case studies that don't really hold weight in making a massive change like this.
Thank you.
I know somebody had a question yesterday about helmeting. I'll answer that really quickly. Was that your question? So go ahead and ask it.
I want to hear all of your spiels on helmets.
Okay, well, so helmeting, you know, in the communities are sometimes recognized as treatment techniques. There are different kinds of helmets. Are you all aware of that? There are passive helmeting systems and dynamic helmeting systems. So it's sort of what you have available to you in your area. You know, the thing about passive helmeting systems is sometimes, you know, what they do is they have a scooped out part, and that allows the baby to have a non-flat surface to lie on. That's an entire thing about the passive helmeting, so that's like the hanger helmet. An example of a dynamic helmet would be like a DOC band, DOC with period, period, period. And that actually does introduce some forces into the skull to help remold it. I work, you know, with the plagiocephaly team at my hospital, and their primary treatment is through helmeting. And my experience is just that it's just not necessary if you do all of these other things. Okay? And there are some babies who have a very big transcranial diameter discrepancy. I just worked with someone with a 22 millimeter transcranial diameter discrepancy. So at times there are, you know, the dynamic helmeting options can be very helpful. So if you have a very severe case and the parents are having a lot of trouble making changes in the baby's life, then it can be an option to go with that. But within the context of talking about body work and craniosacral therapy and innate reflexes and giving babies access to their bodies, it really is just like a tool, okay? It's just another thing. But remember, treating with a helmet is treating the symptom. And the problem is not the flat spot. So if we over-focus and spend $3,000 or $4,000 on a gadget that isn't treating the problem, you really haven't corrected the problem. And Alison mentioned developmental delays. And plagiocephaly doesn't cause developmental delays. Whatever caused you not to turn your head is what is the problem. So we need to be treating the actual problems and not the symptoms. So for me, that's my answer.
I sometimes see babies who are helmeted and their parents have no idea that their children have torticollis. It's not that uncommon, and you know, but the reason they've called me is they want more treatment to change the baby's head shape in addition to the helmet. It's really shocking to me that a family can get all the way into helmeting without anybody addressing even the mainstream medical view of the cause, which would be a neck problem, so to speak.
And I just want to add to what Michelle said, that the helmeting doesn't resolve the underlying functional issues. So there's new research out that shows that these kids still have delay, both developmental and cognitive, just like their counterparts that didn't receive a helmet.
Unless, of course, you work the social nervous system and make sure all those light switches are turned on, and then babies will not have, in fact, developmental delays. And every baby, unless there's severe neurological damage, is capable of bringing this autonomic nervous system online. And the other thing about helmeting is you can keep the helmet, and the torticollis is still there. And even if the head shape changes a little bit, you're not addressing the body as a whole. Okay, so it's mechanistic-minded, and it's old news. And really, there was a British journal, a medical journal, just published a study, a nice one, that showed that it is equally effective to helmet and to do positioning. So helmets are really not even evidence-based medicine, and most of us, especially in hospitals, are being informed to make evidence-based medicine choices. And so we are even looking at this at our hospital, that it's not evidence-based medicine to helmet.
Oh, I just had a quick question on, and you brought it up with the torticollis being one direction, and you put them on their tummy and they turn the other way. Why do we see that?
Well, it happens why it's there in the first place, whatever tension pattern set up in the body. I mean, it just depends, because it's about length-tension relationships. And so when you're on your back, it's different than when you're belly down and have gravity. So your length-tension relationship is going to change. Okay? So it's just a different kind of tightness. You'll feel it in a different place in the body. I don't want to give you a cookie cutter thing, because it isn't. You just want to notice and say, wow, this is definitely not a range of motion problem, because they're turning to the right on their back and their left and their prone. Like, there is not a range of motion problem. It's something about the postural reflexes and their response to gravity and movement, proprioception, where their body is in space.
So you talked about how plagiocephaly and torticollis is an indicator of bodily malalignment, among other things. So I see a lot of babies work on their plagiocephaly, their torticollis. I do a holistic approach to their bodies. They do really well, and their heads are still flat. Or they still have the plagiocephaly.
Are you doing tummy time?
I haven't directed them there, but after
bones
this conference,
will grow in the direction that they're pulled. And when you get belly down and have your head lifting reflexes, all of these muscles pull the back of the skull out, and that over time changes head shape, as well as head turning, as well as neck elongation. So, as well as getting your shoulder girdle down and getting the length of your forearm and your elbows pressing down into the surface. That is what will change the cranial base.
And so ultimately, if I do my work and the family does their work and whoever else is in charge of helping this baby out, we should see a symmetry and a resolution of the plagiocephaly.
Yeah, but sometimes there's not complete resolution of anything, and none of us have perfect symmetry. So we're just trying to get within a functional range between 3 and 5 millimeters, maybe 6 transcranial diameter discrepancy. Anything over 8 is deemed not as attractive in our society. So yes, absolutely. Okay.
I just tell them wait to grow the hair.
We're being completely irresponsible as craniosacral therapists if we're not prescribing tummy time. You can't even say that none of your changes are even going to stick. You can spend there and you can charge them $150 an hour. You can be trained, as well trained as all of us put together in here, and send them home to their regular habits and patterns, and you're not going to get the kind of change that you really want.
Is that the case for all of you? Absolutely.
100%.
I completely agree.
With every single care plan.
Yeah, and it also depends on when we start. We want to maximize the most rapid growth, which is at the youngest time. Starting at 9 months, we're not going to get as wonderful a result because we don't have as much opportunity for the flattened side to begin to grow to what would be its normal shape.
Yeah, when I first started working with a doctor in my community, I asked her, please send some of your babies. And she sent a 4.5-month-old baby. Twins, girl. And I was like, no, because I really wanted some results because I wanted her to start sending babies. And we did see a lot of head shape changes. But if you can get it before 4 months, that would be great. But, you know, the earlier you're going to get better changes, and you're going to start to dome out from the bottom up, and it could be between 7 and 9 years of age before you get your ultimate head shape anyway. And it also depends on the thickness of babies' skulls because they're all different. I mean, some babies have really thin skulls and big wide anterior fontanelles, and some babies have really thick skulls and very tight fontanelles. That's going to have less change. A thicker skull with tighter fontanelles is going to have less bony changes. You're still going to get membranous changes, and over time, the bones will respond, but the bones are going to be the last thing to change. So you want fascial slide and glide, motility and mobility, and over time, that will gradually decrease. But you may see, we all have these little asymmetries, but absolutely. But tummy time is the Wolff's Law principle of it is pulling the back of the head out, and especially head turning to both sides. That's what's going to be pulling it and getting and introducing forces where they weren't introduced before and getting outward growth of the head. I mean, we're getting that outward expansion anyway. Thank you.
Is it on?
Yes.
So if you have a baby that the parents insist on using a helmet, does that change your care plan? Do you increase the frequency of treatment? Do you just keep it the same?
Yeah, it's fine. It's just another thing. It's not really that special. And you can do it, you know, take it off when you're treating. And also, too, encourage parents, if you're using a passive helmeting system, it is incredulous to me for it to be on 23 hours a day. You need it on when they're on their backs, in their car seats, when they're sleeping. But there's no reason to have a helmet on, a passive helmeting system, when they're on their tummy, when they're on their side, when they're being held, when they're being worn, any of those situations. Because the truth of the passive helmeting system is if there are any red spots or any pressure, they're supposed to scoop those out. And all those red spots, when you take it off, they're supposed to not be there. It's not supposed to be introducing any force whatsoever. No, the dock band is a dynamic splinting, and it does need to be on all the time because it's introducing forces. So you just work through it, and you can still take it off. I mean, for your treatment, they're allowed to have it off like an hour a day or something like that, or sometimes a little bit more. But honestly, guys, I mean, let's have faith that we can do this and, like, trust the babies to resolve. You know, we don't, you know, the helmet, even the dock is not sophisticated. You know, it's just a better piece of equipment. Yes?
I'm curious for each of you how much of a role you think that restrictions in the spinal joints themselves can contribute to this, and what role spinal manipulation or adjusting might have in treatment.
I have a chiropractor colleague who I use all the time to deal with any kind of subluxations that, you know, it's not my scope of practice to take care of, and it makes things go faster. But I use somebody who is very gentle in their application, has really great bedside manner, so that she's not freaking everybody out in the process of doing it. And she and I work as a team, so we're constantly communicating back and forth about each case. And she will point out to me, this is what I felt soft tissue-wise, and then I'm going to go after that the next time I see the baby.
Yeah, I work with several chiropractors in my community, and they really have more of a soft tissue oriented approach because I don't I'm not of the one to think that spinal manipulation is that great. That's just my certain opinion because I understand the tensegrity model, and it doesn't matter. You can go in and do like a maneuver, and the soft tissue is going to pull it right back out. So for me, I think soft tissue is the way to go, but I do use chiropractors, and they do use a blend of different things, and I highly appreciate that, but I always hear that it went back out and they have to go back, and so I'm always saying, well, we're going to continue addressing the soft tissue body because that's really where the force-tension relationship for me is in my experience. But I do work with lots of chiropractors in my community and we refer back and forth.
Yeah, I see the subluxation as sort of a secondary effect of something that's happening in the soft tissue. And so in my practice, I would see someone who's doing spinal manipulation as kind of a cleanup batter, someone that's you know, in addition to what I'm doing. Yeah.
guys are all up on all the latest research and you're seeing a lot of clients. I want to see what you disagree on.
I don't know that we actually disagree on anything formally. I think we are provocative to one another to stimulate our work to go forward. And, you know, I think that for me, that's my question, because I don't disagree with anything at all. But I think we tease and provoke each other to develop more well-rounded views of where we're at.
Where do those edges meet up on each other's opinions?
It might be this subluxation thing, because I don't dig that. It's not, for me, that doesn't work.
Well, and here's the thing. For me, it does, because I have a race against the clock. And I'm trying to resolve the breastfeeding problem. And this is the thing that you have to keep in mind about our perspectives, is that if I had the luxury, in other words, the baby doesn't have a breastfeeding problem, but I'm just working on the structural issues related to the torticollis and the plagio, then I'm going to do everything that she's talking about. But when I've got suck, swallow, breathe discoordination and dysfunction on board, and I've got a mother who's saying, I can't take this anymore and I'm going to quit unless you can do something about it, you better believe that I'm going to pull out all the stops and do whatever I can as quickly as I can get it done to keep her going. And as soon as she starts to see the first changes, then she's in for the long haul.
Yeah, and I actually agree with that as well. But the thing of it is, I just don't view anything as anatomy. For me, it's function. Okay, so you know, I think you can get just as quick results with that. But I also know that subluxations do exist. But I believe it's just the tissue body. So I just think sometimes when you get those manipulations, I just see like a short-term improvement in breastfeeding, but not a long-term improvement in breastfeeding, unless the soft tissue body comes too.
That's right. I agree.
So we really don't disagree. But we love to provoke each other, because like if she never said that, maybe it would never test my thinking. So, and the three of us, one of the things we do have in common is we want to be asked, and we want to be questioned, and we want to be taken, you know, to that place where we have to really, you know, say what we're saying is sort of right, or at least somewhat correct.
I agree. Are we down to one more question?
Yes.
Okay.
One more.
So one thing that I also heard was treat what you find versus certain things that need to be released. And there was a recipe of the OA, OCB, and the ethmoid. I'm familiar with the first and the third, but could you remind me what the OCB is?
That's the occipital cranial, but that's the occipital cranial base.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and that's not a recipe.
Okay.
That was the goal. Your suck, swallow, breathe coordination is not going to be intact until all three of those things are fully and exquisitely addressed and released. Okay?
Yeah, so what she was doing is giving you 3 points to check, you know, for like a pre and post thing. And so whatever your work does, you're going to see changes there especially. Anything else?
We did it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
This is a culmination of everybody's love for you and appreciating this, this time for you. You may open it up. They're all spiraled up because we're all going to spiral and dance out of here and take all of this with us. So we're really, really grateful to you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for this thing. I don't know what it is. It's in here.